Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo, and good morning, Rufai. I hope everybody had a great night.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. Now, a violent assault at a synagogue in Manchester, in northern England, on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, has left 2 men dead and others gravely injured. Now, Manchester police say that they believe the synagogue attacker is 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami, who is a British citizen of Syrian descent. The attacker drove a car into worshippers and then began stabbing people before being shot dead by police in what authorities are treating as a terrorist incident. Now, 3 additional suspects had also been arrested, and the UK has increased security at Jewish sites nationwide. Israeli officials and British leaders alike have decried the attack as anti-Semitic and demanded stronger measures against hatred. Well, let's listen to what Keir Starmer, who is, of course, the British Prime Minister, had to say in the aftermath of this terrible attack.
A vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values. So many Jewish families first came to this country as a place of refuge, fleeing the greatest evil ever inflicted on a people. And Britain welcomed them. Communities like the one attacked in Manchester provided safety, but also the security that comes from a promise that this is a country that stands up to hatred, and that we don't just provide refuge, we provide a home.
That was Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister. Now, to the Middle East now, where Israeli forces have intercepted 41 out of 42 vessels from a flotilla attempting to deliver aid to Gaza. Now, nearly 500 activists from multiple countries on this global Sumud flotilla were detained, including parliamentarians, lawyers and activists, including Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg. Now, the move triggered protest in cities worldwide and sharp criticism from governments accusing Israel of violating international maritime law. Organisers say at least one vessel remains in this one vessel that wasn't detained remains, as Israel contends that it acted to prevent a breach of its own security perimeters. And finally, Sean Diddy Combs has apologised and taken full responsibility for all the, quote, hurt and pain he has caused others in a letter to the court hours before he is due to be sentenced. Now, this is the first time that Diddy himself will be addressing the judge, Aaron Subramanian, who, you'll remember, Diddy himself didn't actually take to the stand during his entire trial. So this is the first time he's going to be having direct comms with the judge, with the court. Combs has sentenced, he was convicted, we know, back in July of 2 prostitution-related charges following a trial which lasted almost 8 weeks, but was cleared of those most serious charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Though he could be facing up to 20 years in prison, prosecutors have called for at least 11 years, which, to his defense team anyway, they're hoping that he could serve around 14 months, which, if they do get that, it would mean that he'd be released almost immediately because he has been on remand throughout the trial process. So those are your stories from the World Brief. But before I come to you, let's take a look at our newspapers from today. Firstly, let's start with the front page of This Day. This Day does lead with comments from the Minister of State for Petroleum, Heineken Lokoburi. He is talking about recent divestments by international oil companies and how they have added about 200,000 barrels per day to Nigeria's crude output production. Heineken was speaking in Cape Town in South Africa. This is, of course, Africa Energy Week. Arise News has been covering it, and that's where he made those remarks. He's been speaking on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at that event. Well, we're talking politics on the front page of the New Telegraph. Let's take a look at the New Telegraph, and it's leading with uncertainty over this legal framework and how it can hinder electoral processes. That's what the INEC says. Now, its chairman, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mahmoud Yakubu, has appealed to the National Assembly to expedite action on passing amendments to the electoral legal framework. He says that this is something, of course, INEC and Nigerians need. And he said so when he received the European Union Electoral Observation follow-up mission to Nigeria, who was, of course, led by Barry Andrews. And he led the mission during the 2023 election. Now, to that same vein, let's take a look at the Daily Sun, which leads with the EU saying the same thing, making the same comments on the Daily Sun this morning. The Daily Sun is talking about how, well, perhaps that's the Daily Independent. Perhaps we're moving a bit too fast. Never mind. I'll tell you about the Daily Independent. It's looking at service outages continuing as telcos suffer over 100,000 different fibre cuts. Similarly, the Daily Trust, in that same vein, the Daily Trust does talk about how businesses in the 3Ks, Kaduna, Kano and Katsina, are being affected by erratic power supply. Let's take a look at our British papers. There's no surprises for guessing that our British papers bring us back to this lead story on the World Brief. So that's the UK Guardian, the Independent and the Daily Express, all of them focusing on what we are seeing happening in the United Kingdom following that attack, that terrorist attack on that synagogue in Manchester. So those are your papers, those are your World Brief. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me hear it.
Okay, so a couple of things. For the Sumud flotilla, this really hits home to us here. And James Marwa, a Kenyan writer, activist, journalist, is currently in Nigeria at the Kuramo Festival of Words. And when the story broke, his wife, Zukuziwa, is on that flotilla. In fact, I'm sure Arise has gotten the exclusive out as regards to that story. So this hits home to us. And this is to show you the heinous crimes Israel is perpetrating. She is originally, from, what's it called? She lived at some point in Harare. She lived in South Africa. She's married to a Kenyan. The Kenyan person she's married to is currently in Nigeria as we speak for a book festival. And this has happened. This Sumud flotilla is to give aid and succor to the people that Israel is destroying, that they wouldn't give aid and succor to. And they're trying out there to bring help to these people, but the Israeli Navy coerced them, arrested them and pushed them to the Ashdod port. Why is Israel doing all of this? Only a couple of days ago, Israel also brought about a plan in America that Hamas should take it or no show for them. And Netanyahu had the audacity to go ahead to say, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Remember that's straight out of Goodfellas. And all of this is continuing in a world where America says they're the bastion of civility. There is nothing civil about what Israel is doing, and we totally condemn Israel. We'd like to call on the authorities, our voice is loud enough here, to release those arrested in that flotilla. Do not hold them against their rights. They have a right to bring peace and succor to the people of Gaza. And we stand this morning with John Marwa. I also vehemently condemn the cowardly acts against the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not our problems. No, there are a lot of people that are Jewish that I support that are against the government of Netanyahu. This atrocity is not perpetrated by the Jewish people. It is perpetrated by the government of Netanyahu, the right-wing, rabid, hateful government of Netanyahu. So I stand in solidarity with the Jewish people today that were hurt in that Manchester attack. And I say it must never repeat itself, and the perpetrators must be brought to book.
Right, the Manchester attack, synagogue attack, very sad. Heaton Park in Manchester. And I think what's really important about this story is the fact that this is happening at a time where there have been protests across England, Wales, and just talking about immigration and an increased intolerance to migration and immigration in particular. The perpetrator has been identified as Jihad al-Shami. Now, what the police are saying is that it's possibly an alias, as what Jihad al-Shami simply means Jihad the Syrian. They've identified him, and even the way he's identified speaks a lot, as a Briton, with a Syrian background. If he's British, he's British. Exactly. He came to Britain at a young age and was given British citizenship as a minor. So he's lived in Britain for a significant part of his life. But the fact that they are now tying him to his home country speaks a lot around, this thing around, okay, he's not one of us, he came from, and I think it would push even deeper that conversation around people who come to England or Britain seeking asylum and becoming refugees or attaining British status, and then not being included as much as possible, and then go on to become criminals like this. Right. This is what has given rise to a lot of rhetoric, has made the Reform Party very popular in recent times, is speaking against immigration or migration. Even Kemi Badenoch has said, if they're not willing to come and adopt our lifestyle or our way of life, we should not open our doors to them. So this is going to have a significant impact, I feel, on this anti-immigration stance by a lot of British people. But our hearts go out to the two who have unfortunately lost their lives. All the party leaders have not politicized this. I like that they've come out with, from Reform Party, Green Party, Labour Party, Conservatives have come out with a strong message around Britain is not a home for such, this kind of violence, and that the Jewish community in England, particularly in Manchester, must be protected. And I think that's a very good and strong message to pursue. Just very quickly with the Nigerian newspapers, the Daily Independent has that story on the fiber cuts. I think it's important to mention that the president last year signed an executive order to make, some electricity or power infrastructure critical national information infrastructure as a result of these losses. Just to say that these fiber cuts were as a result of road constructions and vandalism, and that's why we've said that anyone who's caught vandalizing assets like this is a criminal and ought to be arrested and brought to book.
Okay, any form of hate, manifestation of intolerance, or man's inhumanity to man, be it in the greater Manchester area in North England or off the coast of Gaza, stands condemned. What we had yesterday in Manchester was a question of hate, anti-Semitism. On the holiest of days on the Jewish calendar, which is the Yom Kippur, which is a day of reflection and atonement. And yet, the 35-year-old young man chose that same day to drive into a crowd and to, stab people. 2 dead, 3 under critical condition in the hospital. The Jewish congregation has been in that Manchester area since 1935. They deserve to do their worship on Yom Kippur Day, which was celebrated in every Jewish community all over the world. Yes. I think the Greater Manchester Police, as they are called, GMP, have appropriately identified it as plateau, which is how they label whatever is related to acts of terrorism, or what they also called MTA, Marauding Terrorism Act. But the way the government responded is also instructive. Prime Minister Keir Starmer came back almost immediately from Copenhagen in Denmark, where he was having a meeting. And he called an urgent meeting that was attended by key officials of the government, because government has a responsibility to address the escalation in attacks, about 18,000 in 2024 alone. And, we've seen a rise since the 2023 crisis between Israel and Gaza. Now, as for Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been boasting that it is not true there is famine in Gaza, and it is not true that Israel is using genocide as a weapon of war or starvation as a weapon of war. Well, it is Prime Minister Netanyahu that is wrong. Now, the flotilla, by the Shimud, was arrested 72 nautical miles away from the coast of Gaza. Now, that's outside Israel's jurisdiction. Yes. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, as it is called. Now, the seabound territory, territorial sea, is 12 nautical miles. The next is the contiguous zone, which is 24 miles. The next is the exclusive economic zone, which is 200 nautical miles from the seabed of a particular country. Now, what is Israel going to do on the coast of Gaza? Which is a reflection of how Israel has been overreaching itself and violating international law. Yesterday, we spoke about Gustavo Petro opposing the seizure of a flotilla, taking aid to the people of Palestine. Israel has repeated the same offense, and I think it's appropriate that countries around the world, from Italy to Indonesia to Pakistan, are protesting that Israel is wrong. Israel is violating international law. Finally, you brought the story about Diddy Combs.
Yes, sir.
He will be sentenced today. Now, he's saying he has learned his lesson. He's sorry. It was drug problem. He has apologized to Jane, the anonymous Jane, and also Ventura. Well, it's up to the judge to take a look at all of those. But his lawyers, who are begging for 11 years, have the right to go on appeal if the court decides. He was sentenced in July. He was convicted in July. Now he will be sentenced today. We'll wait to see what the developments will be.
All right, well, thank you so very much,
Always a
Adefemi
pleasure.
Akinsanya. I look forward to seeing you again on Monday. Have a great weekend.